Hi, welcome to Ms. Cooper's art class. Today I'm going to be showing you a painting technique called negative painting, and I'll show this to you in watercolor. To use this technique, you'll need some watercolor paper and you'll need to have a drawing that has some depth or some layers to it working backwards. I have a bunch of kind of rock and stone shapes and I numbered them for the first example so you can see how this works. I have kind of an old paint set from my classroom and I have a new brush ready to go. The first thing that you'll want to do is cover the entire painting in a very light layer of watercolor. You can see how shiny my paper is because there's lots of water to thin out that color. In fact, you can barely see that color. I did end up adding just a little bit more to make it a bit easier to see, but I used my paper towel to blot up any excess paint because I can always go darker in the next layers. Now what you see me doing here is I'm skipping all of the rocks that I have labeled as 1. That's because that is just painted in the first layer. Every other rock can be painted though, because they are the second, third, fourth, fifth, and so on layers. You can do as many layers as you want. I just chose 5 for the rocks. Now I'm skipping the stones labeled 2, but I can paint the 3s because this is the third layer. When you're doing your own painting, it wouldn't hurt to label some things in pencil really lightly so you can erase it. I printed mine in a printer, so that ink was not coming off, but I think that helps for you to see. As you work your way backwards, you continue making the layers darker until you get to the very end, and I have no labeled stones, so now I'm just adding one last layer where I even mixed a little bit of purple into the brown that I made just to make it a little bit darker and a little more intense. I mixed my own browns for this out of orange and blue. Now let's try an example that's a little more complicated and doesn't have numbers. I was thinking of leaves, so I drew all of these leaves, put it in a document, and printed it out in my printer so I could make more copies. After I did my first layer, which is very light, I added some details and some shading to the leaves in the first layer because that would help me remember which leaves I was not supposed to paint over in that second layer. I was able to paint with some confidence, especially considering how complicated the design was, because I had kind of marked out which leaves were not to be painted in this layer. I kept using paper towel to make sure I was keeping the paint light enough that there would still be something to see in all the layers that I did afterwards. I continued adding paint where I felt I needed to, let it dry, and then I started adding more details to some of these leaves because that was going to help me know which ones to not paint over. I skipped a little bit of that in the footage, so now you see me going through and adding the next layer of paint, which is kind of a frosty bluish purple. It wasn't quite dark enough for me, so I added a little bit of purple as I went. I realized there was a little bit of kind of whitish pigment in there that was making it hard to notice the difference and see the contrast. I felt like keeping it light for this one, light kind of springy, cool colors, low contrast. Again, there I am marking in some details in the leaves so I know which leaves to not paint over in the next layer. The next one, actually, is going to be the background. That's the last thing that I'm going to paint. This still allows you to add more paint to the layers where you want to, but it helps you to create that depth as you go. What I tell my students all the time is you can always add paint to the paper, but it's pretty hard to remove it once it's there. So that's why working backwards is a good idea, and why you should try this exercise. It also helps you to remember to keep your thoughts organized and slow down while you're painting so that you think about the depth in the layers and you use them carefully. And you avoid painting over something that you don't want to paint over. So here are 2 different examples. There's your basic beginner one, and there's something more complicated. I hope that you will give this a try, and that you'll learn to slow down with your painting and discover all of those beautiful layers, and also save some time in painting things with details as you go. Take care. Thank you for watching.